Last week, Square Enix announced their latest MMO expansion, Endwalker, at the Final Fantasy XIV announcement showcase. Hosted by director-producer Naoki Yoshida and translator-writer-vocalist Michale Koji Fox, they ran through all of the things we can expect to see later this year. That's all exciting, but one of the big things I was looking forward to is the newest CG trailer, created by Square Enix's in-house animation studio. The Final Fantasy XIV trailers are created at Square Enix Visual Works, a Square Enix subsidiary that's been around since roughly Final Fantasy VII, but not always under that name. At the time, they were making their first steps into CGI and wanted to pursue cinematic storytelling, which prompted the need for cinematic storytellers. Through Final Fantasies VII and VIII, the team's capabilities expanded until it was decided that they would create a feature film with a focus on realism. This was Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, and it was a massive failure, due in part to an obsession with realism. Today's Visual Works team have learned from those mistakes and now work to combine realism and art, something evident in each of the trailers. It's easy to imagine these characters and locations as being real, but the movements and expressions are consistently larger than life. One of the ways they achieve this is through their combination of animating by hand and motion capture. They created a system so that animators could record themselves doing real-life movements in the motion capture studio, and then that data would be sent immediately to their desk, where they could then animate it to feel more fantasy-esque. So you've got stuff like Alpha No Healing Alize, which was likely done with motion and facial capture, while the flips and flourishes were likely animated by hand. Another example of this blend is texture work. The trailer opens up with a close-up of the Warrior of Light's paladin armor, with all its realistic scratches and wear and tear. But really, the best way to achieve this is to find it in real life. A lot of the props used in Visual Works trailers actually exist, and are then scanned in so the reflections and textures feel real. So the team likely went out and found a similar armor breastplate and scanned it to recreate the texture in the trailer. The Visual Works team has been particularly well regarded for their fabric and hair animation work, and this is also defined by a mix of reality and fantasy. Like most CGI, it's largely defined by simulations, but this group always works backwards. They know exactly how they want it to look, they just need to rig the simulations to create that. For instance, when the Warrior of Light swings his sword on the moon, first they needed to create wind on the moon, which is silly enough, but then the amount of wind being applied to each part of him is different. So they can have a big flowing cape, but only a slight rustling of his hair. Naoki Yoshida works closely with the Visual Works team on his ideas for the next expansion, since their work takes the longest and things need to be planned a year in advance of the trailer release. For instance, the animations for the new Sage class were probably first decided here, and the game's animations would be made to match them. This is actually common for the cinematics team, with them often having to create magic systems or 3D rigs for games that haven't developed them yet. Right now, all we've seen is the teaser trailer, but the full-length one is often double the size, so it's something to look forward to later in 2021 during the virtual Final Fantasy FanFests. Thanks for watching OTAQUEST in Japan. Feel free to subscribe to find out more about the art and creation of Japanese pop culture.